Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today's video on Assassin's Creed Shadows. I'm going to go over how to optimize your build, right? Because there's a lot of bullshit, inaccurate information out there that people are just kind of throwing out there, especially YouTubers. And I take a look at a lot of these builds they're coming out with, and it's straight up trash, right? Uh, they got half the part right, you know what I'm saying? And the other half is just nullifying whatever effect that they think that's happening, that's intended to go. And I'm pretty much going to take it back to the basis and also cover some strategies when it comes to playing on expert mode, because everybody is saying, oh, expert mode is so easy. It's not a challenge. I don't know where these guys get that shit from. I'm going to tell you something. Me, personally, on expert mode, I die at least once a day. And that's on a good day, right? When I play this. So I barely get touched, right? But every now and then I'm in the midst of combat. I might make one or two mistakes and boom, it's over with, right? So for the players still struggling on expert mode in combat or whatever case, I'm going to go over some essential strategies and tips. I'm going to do my best to try not to make this video too long, but just long enough so that you guys understand, right? So here we go. All right, first things first, when it comes to optimizing your builds, right? I want you guys to understand the only equipment that has global passive abilities, right? What is the difference between global passive abilities and specialized weapon abilities? I'm going to break down the difference between the two. Okay, let's go over back to the basics. Global passives is when you have an ability that affects all the weapons and total stats that you have, no matter what you have equipped. It doesn't matter, right? Specialized weapon abilities is when you have a specific weapon and the effect that's on that specific weapon only works for that weapon and it's not transferred over to anything else, right? Couple things, right? Let's get this straight away, right? Identical engravings do not stack. I repeat, identical engravings do not stack. A lot of you guys, I see a lot of you guys builds, a lot of these YouTubers, like I said, I won't name no names, but like I said, they're going around and they're just straight up making money off the views and just, monetizing the content. And they don't give a damn whether what they're saying is accurate or not. And they don't even respond to, people's responses in the comments, right? So I'm here to tell you how to properly optimize the build, which is every single engraving that you install into your character when you play Naoe or Yasuke has to be different. Okay? So let's say you mess around and you put, 20% damage with afflictions, for example, right? And you put that on, let's say, a katana, right? Or whatever the case may be. This is just an example. It's not going to add another 20% to your overall global passive and make it 40% damage with affliction. It's just not, right? You have to find a different graving. And I'm telling you, once you understand this concept, this is going to make your builds so much stronger, right? So much stronger. Okay? So identical gravings do not stack. So, and here's the thing. I would even say that I made a mistake personally because the last video I made a katana build video, and that was before I knew what I know now, and that build is all wrong, right? So if anybody's still following that build, don't do it unless you're playing like our normal mode, because if you try that shit on expert mode, you're going to get slaughtered. I'm just telling you right now, right? But more on combat tips a little bit later, which I'm going to go over, right? So every single engraving that you have, you want to make sure. For instance, this is my personal bleed build, right? Nothing too crazy. Okay. As you can see here, every single engraving that I have is different, right? Trigger bleed on entanglement. Spread bleed affliction build up with combo ender, right? 20% damage with afflictions, vault over enemies while sprinting, right? Now, spread affliction buildup on afflicted enemy kill, which is different from spread affliction buildup on combo ender, right? Two different engravings, right? But some people, they'll put the same thing and think that somehow it's going to double the effect, and it's not. Okay. 600% affliction buildup when hitting vulnerable enemies. I'm still like, have a misconception about this and whether it's actually 600% or it's six, because I know it's alternate alter ego engraving, which was 600%, I believe, affliction buildup on posture attacks or some shit like that. I think they nerfed it down to 6%. I'm not sure if that was some type of game interface error or that's what it actually was. But, that's neither here or there. But, okay, 600% affliction buildup when hitting vulnerable enemies, I believe is only actually 6%. I don't think it's actually 600, right? And then, boom, 1% vulnerable damage per mastery point in Assassin, 2% critical damage per mastery point in Katana. So here's the thing. The purpose of this video is not to go over the actual build, because this build is actually devastating, right? With the skill trees and everything else that I put on it. This is the goal to overall show you guys how everything that I put is actually different, right? This is what's going to maximize your build, right? And it's going to make you want to, hunt for items more efficiently and, what items to put back, what items not to pick, right? Depending on what build that you're trying to do. Because look, there are 3 different equipments that have global passive. That is your hoodie, right? Your headgear that you wear, 20% damage with afflictions. That's going to go on the katana, right? That's going to go on the Kusarigama if it has an affliction build, right? It's all over, all weapons, all base stats, right? That's the second global passive. No, that's the first global passive that I'm going to break down. The second one is your armor, okay? So anything that you put on your armor has an overall effect on all weapons that you have, all overall base stats, because it's a global passive, right? That's the second one. And the third one is the trinket, right? In this example, I'm using Okubi's Laughter. So with Okubi's Laughter, right, 1% vulnerable damage per mastery point in Assassin and 2% critical damage per mastery point in Katana, which I put. These 2 engravings, this damage is going to carry out whatever weapon I have. Whatever weapon that I have is going to be in effect. Now, if I would have somehow, right, let's just say, this is just for an example. Let's say if you were able to put 2% critical damage per mastery point on the, Tonto, right? Let's just say, right? Actually, you can't do that. You can only put that on the trinket. But let's just use that as an example. If you would have put 2% critical damage mastery per katana, right? A lot of people would say, a lot of YouTubers would say, well, somehow, that effect is going to transfer over to the primary weapon that I have. And that's going to, give me additional damage on top of whatever engraving I have on the first weapon. No, it does not. Okay, it does not work that way. It does not. Okay. Any engraving that you put on your Tonto or a specific weapon will only be applied to that weapon only. The weapons are specialized engraving empowerments. Okay, they're not global passives. I need you guys to understand the difference between global passives and not global passives. The 3 global passives are headgear, armor, and trinket, right? Katana, whatever, or Tanto or Kusarigama, those are all specialized weapons that when you put the engravings on them, it's only for those weapons only, right? So remember, the global passives now can now transfer over to the weapons that you have, right? That's a different story. Okay, so if you had 50% damage on, poison affliction, for example, on your katana here, right? Then, okay, like this one, Toxic Kusarigama of Tangling, which is a real good item. 24% damage when hitting vulnerable enemies, right? Now, if I would have had a damage, if I have a damage, remember, guys, and another thing, even if it's a global passive, don't think if you put a 30% critical chance on your hoodie and a 30% critical chance on your armor is going to stat just because it's global passives. It's not. The game still overrides having same identical gravings. And the reason why Ubisoft did this is because they want players to experience variety and use their creative thinking to just kind of put their own builds together using different items, right? If that was the case, think about it. Everybody you'll be one-shotting the entire game. I wish that was possible. I have like 150, 200% crit chance on a build if that was the case, right? Because I'll put that shit on all the weapons, the armor, headgear, and everything. It'd be OD, right? So it would be like an abuse of the system, and they don't want that, right? Unless now, and this is a theory that I might have, maybe the YouTubers, the big YouTubers that kind of have access to games when they first come out, because Ubisoft, sometimes gives, and these major game companies give YouTubers or social media influencers first access to some of these games. Maybe somehow, maybe they might have modded it specifically to where they can do that and we can't, but that might be kind of silly. I don't know. I'll be thinking about crazy shit sometimes, but maybe that might be the case. But I know us, regular gamers, now we don't have that, right? So yeah, they don't stack. So just because you have a global passive, and each global passive items like your headgear or your armor have, two of the same engravings, it still won't stack. It has to be different. So like I said, if I had 24% damage when hitting vulnerable enemies, and let's say my katana had 50% damage on poison afflicted enemies, and I had a katana build that inflicts poison, and I used Volt over Sprinting to make them vulnerable to activate the 30% critical chance when hitting vulnerable enemies, and the 24% damage when hitting vulnerable enemies, then that will stack. That'll be a total of 74% damage, right? Because they're two different engravings. So I hope that clears everything up, right? So, couple things I want to go over, right? Now that we have that out the way, to pretty much optimize your builds, strategies for expert mode, right? Number one, the main skill that I have that helps me shred through enemies, Tanto, which is this one right here, right? This particular ability, which is Broken Spirit. One shot kill, right? Sometimes you'll fight Guardians or whatever the case may be, and sometimes they'll block it, right? Sometimes they'll grab your hand and, throw you back, right? Or second worst case scenario, you'll take a big chunk of health from them, leaving with like a tiny bit of health left, and you just finish them off with whatever, right? The reason why I like this ability, right? The reason why I like this is because it helps you get rid of enemies fast, very fast, right? Especially when you're outnumbered, right? And you have that one enemy, right? Who's just annoying, right? He just putting the pressure on you while everybody else is wailing on you, right? And in expert mode is when you only get a few shots, you know, before it's over for you. Depending on the enemy, they catch you with a good 3 consecutive or 4 strikes, it's over for you, right? So that's number one. Number two, I want you guys to think about how the breakdown of enemy combatants are in expert. Not just an expert, but in all difficulties at a certain stage in the game, right? Sometimes I think it starts at mid to end stage, right? And what do? Right? When you play in the beginning, all you fight is just enemies with melee weapons. But then as you progress, especially when you go to castles, right? What happens? You fight guys with melee weapons, and then you have ranged enemies. And those guys are the problem, right? Because while you're fighting, you could be handling 10 guys with melee weapons doing fine, no problem. Those guys aren't the really ones you have to worry about. But I will break down some melee guys who you kind of do have to worry about and you should get rid of quickly, right? So that's the blueprint when it comes to like mid game and end game, right? So with that being said, this is another thing I want you to understand. When you get to mid game, end game, it's melee enemies plus range guys. So they have the whole setup and they're smart, right? Because as they're attacking you, they're also hitting you with the bow and arrow, right? And they're hitting you with the rifle. So I like to use the Tanto in case if I'm too busy dealing with the melee guys, whether they're using the kanabo or they're using the katana or spearsman, then you can actually go right up to, I like to go right up to the guy who has the rifle first and the archers and take them out with the one shot Tanto. If you have the ability on your armor to assassinate nearest enemy with the kunai shot, that does, even more significant amount of damage. It helps you get rid of enemies quickly. So the key to surviving in expert mode efficiently is how fast you kill enemies, right? The more time you spend with them, more time they're gonna give you to whoop your ass, right? I'm just telling you, right? So wanted to break that down. Two, right? Another important thing I want to go over. Sometimes for the Kusarigama players, and this is something that I noticed, right? Now, I can't find this enemy right now because he's not present. These enemy types are not present at the moment as I'm looking at these guys. But there's a specific enemy type, and you guys know what I'm talking about. They come with like this little wooden stick with a circle on top, and then they call explosive arrows from the sky, right? You know the guys I'm talking about. Sometimes, this is what I notice when in my own gameplay experience, because I have over like 200 plus hours doing this shit, probably going on 3, right? So look, sometimes on, I don't know if they do this on normal mode too, but I know on expert, right? What they tend to do is if you do the Cyclone Blast with Kusarigama, I don't know if they do this with other special abilities. I haven't really, tested it yet, but I know specifically with the Kusarigama, they will actually counter your whole special ability with 4 chunks filled and make your adrenaline chunks actually empty, maybe by 2 to 3 of them, depending on how much you use. They will counter it, they will block it, and they will cancel your whole movement, stopping you from doing the entire technique, period. Right? So you guys have to be aware of that, right? These are some changes that guys don't talk about in the game, right? So those guys, you want to take them out first, right? I personally like to use Vault over sprinting enemies, right? I mean, sprinting while vaulting over enemies, and then I hit them with the special move while in a vulnerable state. And as you can see my build, all the damage and bleed poison effect is extremely devastating. Either it kills them in a few shots, or it just kind of, whatchamacallit, it leaves them with very, 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 very low health, right? So, another thing I want to go over, when you're fighting, right, you see this area right here, right? Sometimes you'll be fighting, I don't have an example to show you guys. If I could go to a castle, which I'm not going to as of right now, but I'm just going to explain it as I'm playing through, right? So, what I was going to say is, sometimes when you're fighting in castles or forts, sometimes you're going to be near places where there's a ledge and there's water. I have personally experienced sometimes when you're dealing with multiple enemies, you don't want to fight near the edge because sometimes you might trigger the hang off ledge by accident, right? I know that's happened to me. And you either get, once you're hanging off the ledge, you're a sitting duck, right? So you're going to get shot, sliced up, and in on expert mode, you could die like that very easily, right? Because you're a sitting duck. So be very, very careful when you're fighting, right, against the edges. Try to stay away from the ledge, right, and stay as far away as possible. And also try to position yourself in an area where there's a wide amount of space, right? Because a lot of times people will get caught up in fighting in, small areas. I know I did, and then you get your ass whooped, right? Then you be wanting to rage and throw the controller like I would do sometimes. No, I'm just kidding. But hey, another combat tip I want to go over dealing with that is sometimes, guys, I don't know if y'all are aware of this, but when you're fighting in the snow season, for those that like to use a sprint vault over enemies while making them vulnerable, there's some areas in the snow that will not allow you to sprint. And the last thing you want is to have, whatchamacallit, dealing with a bunch of guys with, got full adrenaline trunk, but you can't really sprint and move around fast enough, to dispatch enemies with speed and agility, right? So if you're fighting, especially when you're fighting in winter season, try to avoid areas that have deep snow, right? Because it will not allow you to sprint dead ass, right? Like that's something I don't really see too many people. I don't see nobody talking about, but you don't want to do that. So when you're fighting, you kind of want to, stay on flat ground that don't have too much snow, which Naue will still be able to run, right? So I'm gonna see if I could try to fight here in Kashiwara Fort to see if, I could give you a sort of an example of what I'm talking about. Okay, you see this guy right here? This is the enemy. This is the guy that rains the arrows from the sky, right? You want to take him out fast, right? Dead already. Now I don't have to worry about him raining down arrows, right? Another thing you don't want to do. Another thing you don't want to do, right, while you're fighting, is do the feral burst while that guy is shooting arrows from the sky, because that animation will still stay there. You can't cancel it out, and you'll get blown up with arrows as that's happening. And by the time you finish doing the combo, you're already dead, right? So that's another mistake I used to make. I try not to make, or whatever, and it helps out a lot, right? So I hope that covers everything. Some of my personal combat tips and build optimizing. And now I'm just gonna take care of these guys, right, as I'm talking to you guys. Whoop, whoop. I'm gonna take out the Guardian first, right? Because he's a problem. See? You don't want to do combos while the guy's swinging, right? But I had to take him out, right? I can't take no chances, right? So fuck it. Also, you want to learn weapon switching, which is you want to wait for the dodge animation is complete and then hit your weapon switch, right? You don't want to try to do it like in the middle of you dodging, because that's going to cause her sometimes to roll back into enemy strikes, and you don't want that. You definitely don't want that. So be patient, wait for the dodge to complete, and then switch weapons, right? So watch. See how I effectively switch weapons? Boom. While moving. You want to master that so you can alternate in between. Kind of want to do that so you can learn to alternate in between both weapons and maximize usage of your multiple abilities to kind of keep the murder spree going, right? Oh, shit. Now I'm gonna wait for him to come. That's right. Didn't kill him all the way. See, that block right there is what they'll do to you when you do the Cyclone Blast. And it'll literally stop the entire animation and cancel the movement, right? I just want to let that be known, right? I haven't displayed it in the video. They haven't done it, but it does happen. And the guys who do it is those guys, the guy that just blocked my Kusarigama swing, and the guys who rain arrows from the sky. So just be careful with that. Right? I'm actually toying with these guys. Like, I'm talking to y'all while fighting at the same time. All right, that's over with. And just to show you, right? Expert mode, right? So another thing I want to go over, one last thing I didn't go over when dealing with this, is that you want to have your health maxed out to 9, right? You want to have 9 health rations to increase your survivability. Because if I would have had 3, they would have smoked me in this freaking fort, right? It'd have been over for me, right? So you want to have your rations maxed out to 9 so that you can survive and you know prolong yourself during the combat because you're gonna get hit, right? Unless you're like one of these no damage gods, right? Don't know how they do it. Shout out to those guys; they're really great. They're like not human, so you know they'll go hours or the whole game without getting touched once. That's insane, right? So yeah, with that being said, yeah, man, that pretty much sums it up for now. As far as the rations, I'm not gonna go over how to upgrade that now. I'll probably do that in a separate video, but it deals with I forgot the name of the side quest that you got to do, but it has to do with like collecting T-bowls and stuff like that. Like the more T-bowls that you collect, the more rations do you get as part of your upgrade, and that kind of that's like how that works. So but I'll go over that in a separate video breaking down who you need to go to, who in your world map you need to follow, and you know how to track down all the T-bowls one by one. You want me to do a video on that? So yeah, that's it, man. I'm out.